Inclement. Unfavorable, storm.
She blamed her absence from the game on the inclement weather, but we knew that was sour grapes.
Peruse. To read carefully.
After being admonished by his father, he began to peruse the want ads daily.
Premonition. Forewarning.
When the black cat crossed her path, Ellen had a premonition of disaster.
Desist. Cease.
The pickets promulgated a warning that they would not desist in their efforts to enhance their standard of living.
Recoil. Draw back.
As the snake prepared to strike, the girls recoiled in horror.
To pay the piper. To bear the consequences.
The cruel leader was doing well at the present time, but he knew that one day he might have to pay the piper.
Jerry Hart's sixth sense. An uneasy feeling had made Jerry Hart miserable all day long. It was difficult to explain, but the similar sensations in the past had been accurate. Trouble was on the way. Just as some people can predict the onset of inclement weather because of an aching in their bones, so could Jerry detect incipient disaster. He sat at his desk, trying to peruse a company report, but his efforts were ineffectual. The gnawing at his insides, the tinge of uneasiness, the premonition of calamity that besieged him would not desist. When the phone rang, he recoiled with fear. It was his wife and she was hysterical. Their son had been bitten by a mad dog.
Week 10, Day 2. Pertinent. To the point.
During the trial, the astute lawyer was able to elicit the pertinent information from the key witness.
Mastiff. Large dog.
My nervous neighbor bought a pugnacious mastiff to frighten burglars.
Obsess. To haunt, preoccupy.
The stockbroker was obsessed with the idea of becoming a painter.
Doleful. Sad, melancholy.
Doleful expressions abounded throughout headquarters on the night of the election.
Wan. Sickly pale.
After the tension, his normally ruddy face was wan and tired.
On the carpet. Being scolded.
Because of her repeated lateness, Betty's boss called her on the carpet.
Crisis. As soon as Jerry Hart could get the pertinent facts from his wife, he dashed out of the office on his way home. He jostled people in the hallway, implored the elevator operator to hurry, and with flagrant disregard for an elderly gentleman, jumped into the cab he had hailed. The 20-minute taxi ride seemed interminable, and all the while horrible thoughts occurred to Jerry. Visions of an ugly mastiff with foaming jaws obsessed him. A crowd of people had gathered in front of his house, so that Jerry had to force his way through them. Little Bobby was on his bed, surrounded by a doctor, a policeman, Jerry's doleful wife, his 2 daughters, and a half-dozen neighbors.
Week 10, Day 3. Histrionics. Display of emotions.
Saying that he would not tolerate her histrionics, the director fired the temperamental actress.
Elusive. Hard to grasp.
All his life he found happiness elusive, but wealth easy to come by.
Frustrate. Counteract, foil, thwart.
The warden frustrated the prisoner's attempt to escape by adding more guards.
Symptomatic. Having to do with signs or symptoms, indicative.
The sordid rioting was symptomatic of the problems facing the large cities.
Interject. Insert, interrupt.
Most viewers hate it when a commercial is interjected into a suspense drama.
To show one's hand. To reveal one's intentions.
When someone joined in bidding for the antique, the dealer was forced to show his hand.
A time for decision. The doctor explained the situation calmly, avoiding histrionics. First of all, they didn't know whether the dog had rabies. Secondly, the elusive dog had frustrated all attempts to find him so far. Finally, the decision would have to be made whether Bobby was to undergo the painful vaccination, administered daily for 2 weeks. Mrs. Hart said that a neighbor, who had seen the dog, claimed that it had been foaming at the mouth, barking, and growling constantly, all symptomatic of rabies. But the policeman interjected that there hadn't been a case of a mad dog in the county in over 20 years. He repudiated the neighbor's report, advocating that they do nothing for at least another day. Mr. and Mrs. Hart sat down to think about their next step.
Week 10, Day 4. Inert. Without power to move.
Seeing the inert player, the manager dashed out onto the field.
Salient. Outstanding, prominent.
One of the salient features of her poetry is a dependence upon euphemisms.
Imminent. Likely to happen, threatening.
The senator loathed it when people said that an atomic war was imminent.
Squeamish. Easily shocked, oversensitive.
When his squeamish partner complained about a lack of ethics, the businessman laughed at his innocence.
Engrossed. Absorbed.
Engrossed in his crossword puzzle, he failed to notice the paucity of customers in the restaurant.
To tilt at windmills. To fight imaginary enemies.
The vice president told the committee, "We're really on your side, and if you fight us you'll be tilting at windmills."
The pertinent facts about rabies. Give me some of the rudimentary information about the disease, Doc, said Jerry, glancing toward the inert figure of his son. Well, as you know, the malady used to be called hydrophobia, fear of water, because one of the symptoms is an inability to swallow liquids. Actually, it is caused by a live virus from the saliva of an infected animal. If saliva gets into a bite wound, the victim may get rabies. The virus travels along the nerves to the spine and brain. Once the salient characteristics appear, 10 days to 6 months, then death is imminent. What are the symptoms? Asked Mrs. Hart. Pain and numbness, difficulty in swallowing, headaches and nervousness. Also, muscle spasms and convulsions. The squeamish neighbors who were engrossed in the doctor's remarks gasped. I think we should go ahead with the injections, the distraught Mrs. Hart said. I've heard enough.
Week 11, Day 1. Poignant. Painful to the feelings, moving.
The sermon was poignant enough to bring tears to the brash delinquent's eyes.
Inundate. To flood, to swamp.
Even though his boat was almost inundated, the skipper was loath to radio for help.
Fruitless. Useless.
After a fruitless attempt to wrest control of the government, the traitors were incarcerated.
Garbled. Confused, mixed up.
Although the message was garbled, its salient points were clear enough.
Sanguine. Optimistic.
Because the malignancy had gone unchecked, the surgeons were not sanguine about the patient's chances.
To feather one's nest. Grow rich by taking advantage of circumstances.
While working as the tax collector, he adroitly feathered his own nest.
The search for the dog continued. Meanwhile, the Harts had notified the local radio stations to broadcast a poignant appeal for the dog's owner to come forward. The station was inundated with phone calls, but all leads were fruitless. From what Bobby had told them, a huge dog had leaped out from a red station wagon in the supermarket's parking lot. After biting Bobby, it vanished. The 6-year-old was too concerned with the bites he had received to see where the dog disappeared to. The boy's story was garbled, but he did remember that the animal was gray and had a collar. There was little tangible evidence to go on, but the police remained sanguine.
Week 11, Day 2. Phlegmatic. Calm, hard to rouse to action.
Harriet's egregious error disturbed even her phlegmatic employer.
Corroborate. Confirm, support.
Even the swindler's nefarious accomplice refused to corroborate his alibi.
Comprehensive. Thorough.
In order to get the job, you had to go through the drudgery of filling out a 10-page comprehensive questionnaire.
Zealous. Enthusiastic.
The fundraiser was so zealous that he solicited money from a Salvation Army Santa Claus.
Coerce. To force.
The elusive fugitive was coerced by his attorney into surrendering.
Fair-weather friends. Unreliable, they fail one in time of distress.
The general was chagrined to learn that so many of his supposed supporters were actually fair-weather friends.
No relief. The normally phlegmatic Jerry Hart was deeply upset. 24 hours had passed without result, and even if the rabies could not be corroborated, Jerry was determined to see that his son received the vaccine. At the suggestion of some friends, he organized a comprehensive search party, zealously fanning out in circles around the supermarket. They knocked on every door, inspected every dog, and came back empty-handed. Although the Harts were sick with worry, they had to be coerced into going to sleep. Little Bobby seemed to be in great spirits. The excruciating vigil continued.
Week 11, Day 3. Elapse. To slip by.
Inadvertently, Emma had allowed 2 months to elapse before paying her rent.
Meticulous. Careful.
The meticulous musician had nothing but disdain for his disorganized friends.
Domicile. Home.
A man's domicile is his castle.
Lax.
Because the watchman was lax, thievery was rampant at the warehouse.
Sporadic. Occasional.
The lackluster battle was punctuated by sporadic mortar fire.
To sow one's wild oats. To lead a wild, carefree life.
During his teen years, the millionaire avidly sowed his wild oats.
The police find the dog. 40 hours had elapsed before the police work, and the publicity paid off. By meticulously checking the registrations of every red station wagon in the neighborhood and then cross-checking dog licenses, the police narrowed the search to 4 owners. After a few telephone calls, the apologetic owner was located and directed to bring her muzzled German Shepherd to the Hart domicile. Bobby identified the dog, and the animal was taken to a veterinary's clinic to have the necessary tests performed. The lax owner, Mrs. McGraw, admitted that the dog had a sporadic mean streak, but she scoffed at the idea of rabies. Jerry Hart noticed for the first time in 2 days that his uneasy feeling had departed.
Week 11, Day 4. Rash. Too hasty, reckless.
It was exceedingly rash of the lightweight to insult the belligerent longshoreman.
Conjecture. Guess.
It was sheer conjecture on the detective's part, but it led to the arrest of the vexatious counterfeiters.
Obviate. Do away with, eliminate.
The necessity for preparing sandwiches was obviated when the picnic was postponed.
Lurid. Sensational.
The newspaper switched from mundane coverage to lurid reporting.
Quip. Joke.
Hamlet remembered that Yorick was always ready with a lusty quip.
Windfall. Unexpected financial gain.
When the bankrupt company struck oil, the surprised investor received a windfall of $20,000.
All's well that ends well. The Harts were greatly relieved to learn that the rash conjecture about the dog was not true. Because the German Shepherd was not rabid, the necessity for the painful treatment was obviated. The police gave the dog's owner a summons for allowing the animal to go unmuzzled. Little Bobby was treated to an ice cream sundae and a Walt Disney double feature. The neighbors searched for other lurid happenings, and Jerry Hart went back to his office. "What kind of dog was that?" his secretary asked. "Oh, his bark was worse than his bite," quipped Jerry.
Week 12, Day 1. Diatribe. Bitter criticism.
When a large expenditure is imminent, my father goes into a long diatribe on the need for economy.
Inhibition. Restraint.
After 2 drinks, the usually phlegmatic dentist lost all his inhibitions.
Fortuitous. Accidental.
The meeting was a fortuitous one, but the jealous husband construed it as prearranged and clandestine.
Incoherent. Disjointed.
Since the patient's speech was garbled and incoherent, we could only conjecture as to his message.
Ilk. Kind, sort.
It is often fruitless to argue with racists, bigots, and others of that ilk.
To wear one's heart on one's sleeve. To make one's feelings evident.
People who wear their hearts on their sleeves frequently suffer emotional upsets.
Off-Broadway. When Monty Zilch told his boss, Mr. Foy, that he was quitting as an accountant to become an actor, the man was convulsed with laughter. After Mr. Foy realized that Monty was obsessed with the idea, he became quite serious, launching into a diatribe on the importance of responsibility in the younger generation. Monty confessed that he had been developing ulcers as an accountant, and when his psychiatrist suggested that the sickness was a result of inhibitions, Monty agreed. Now, a fortuitous opportunity to get into show business required Monty to make an immediate decision. Mr. Foy stormed out of the office, muttering incoherently about hippies, beatniks, and others of that ilk.
Week 12, Day 2. Prestigious. Illustrious.
A salient feature of the prestigious company's success was its fair treatment of employees.
Placard. Poster.
The police posted a placard asking all citizens to desist from looting.
Integral. Essential.
She seemed to be an unimportant member of the president's entourage, but actually she played an integral role in White House affairs.
Remuneration. Reward, pay.
Derek Jeter's remuneration from the New York Yankees made him a millionaire many times over.
Nominal. Slight.
For allowing his ferocious mastiff to appear on a commercial, the trainer was paid a nominal sum.
To wash dirty linen in public. To openly discuss private affairs.
Let's talk about it privately, his uncle said, rather than wash our dirty linen in public.
An all-round man. The need for a decision came about when Monty was invited to join a prestigious summer stock company, starting in mid-June. As a mature apprentice, he would be required to take tickets, paint scenery, prepare placards, assist with lighting, costumes, and props, and carry an occasional spear in a walk-on role. Since the company would stage 5 major plays during the summer, as well as a half-dozen shows for children, there was a chance that Monty might actually get a part before too many weeks had elapsed. In addition, he would be attending the drama classes that were an integral part of the summer theater. The remuneration would be nominal, but at last Monty Zilch would be fulfilling a lifelong ambition.
Week 12, Day 3. Expunge. Erase.
After having made the rash statements, the senator wished that he could expunge them from the record.
Flamboyant. Showy, colorful.
Our theatrical pages were inundated with press releases from the flamboyant producer.
Anathema. Something greatly detested.
The traitor's name was anathema in his father's domicile.
Schism. Split.
A pernicious schism developed between the two sisters.
Utopia. Place of perfection.
In Lost Horizon, a character recoiled at the idea of living in a utopia.
To save face. To avoid disgrace.
Instead of firing the corrupt executive, they allowed him to retire in order that he might save face.
From ledgers to scripts. During the first weeks of the summer, Monty Zilch didn't even have time to consider whether he had made an egregious mistake. He was too engrossed with his work, performing 1,001 odd jobs around the theater. First, there was the opening production of a chorus line, then 2 weeks of The Fantastics, followed by a poignant diary of Anne Frank, which did excellent business. All through those weeks, Monty painted, carried, nailed, collected, ran, studied, and perspired. He had expunged all traces of debits and credits from his mind, burying himself in the more flamboyant world of the theater. Accounting became anathema to him, as the schism between his present utopia and his former drudgery widened.
Week 12, Day 4. Timorous. Fearful.
Under duress, the normally timorous husband was coerced into demanding a raise.
Truncated. Cut short.
It is frustrating to have one's lengthy remarks printed in truncated form.
Jaunty. Sprightly, gay.
With his cap set at a jaunty angle, the amicable sailor strutted down the street.
Fractious. Quarrelsome.
Roger's fractious behavior compounded the bad relationship he had already had with his partner.
Ostentatious. Showy.
In an ostentatious display of histrionics, the star refused to perform.
Indian summer. Warm autumn weather.
Parts of the country were deep in snow, but the East was enjoying an Indian summer.
Irony for Merryweather. At last, Monty's chance to perform came. He had played the timorous lion in a truncated version of The Wizard of Oz, which the apprentices had staged. But now, there was an open audition to cast the final show of the season. It was to be a jaunty original comedy, given a summer tryout prior to a Broadway opening. Monty, who by now had adopted the stage name of Monty Merryweather, read for the producers, hoping to get the part of the hero's fractious landlord. Unfortunately, the competition was too rough, but the director assigned Monty to a less ostentatious part. And so for the first 2 weeks in September, the stage-struck accountant had a 2-minute, 2-line part. What was his role? The hero's accountant.